Today we're here to talk about the future of motorcycle design. And I'd like to maybe get to know our panel a little bit more before we get into the discussion. So let's get into introductions. Michelle, you first. It's really exciting for us to have an Australian motorcycle company represented here today, and not just a regular company, but a company that's producing electric motorcycles. Can you tell us a little bit about Fonzarelli?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. So Fonzarelli, we've been around for a decade, and we're manufacturing electric motorcycles and a range of electric scooters down here in Sydney. We manufacture some things overseas, and we've just been moving more and more towards bringing as much production back on shore as we can. So that's really influenced how we design and what manufacturing processes we use so that it makes sense.
Thanks, Michelle. And Leo, you're local to us. You're just down the road. And Ellaspede has been on the scene in Brisbane since 2012, I think. But tell us a bit about yourself and Ellaspede.
Yeah, so I started the business with my business partner Steve and I. He's actually popped up on screen at the moment. We started the business, and we're essentially, we met at uni. We're both product designers by background, and we really sort of started out just building a couple of bikes for ourselves. They ended up in an art gallery, and then that basically just launched an entire business for us here in Brisbane. So we still do a lot of design stuff outside of the world of motorcycles, but we sort of, our passion really is building the bikes and whatever we can kind of do to sort of further that, taking on different bike builds, taking on sort of new innovative builds, and sort of really trying to push our own envelope in terms of the aesthetic that we want to see out there.
Fantastic. And Dare, here as the founder of Deus Ex Machina, really now a global phenomenon in terms of motorcycle culture and lifestyle. I feel like, if you don't know Deus Ex Machina by now, I don't know where you've been, but tell us a bit about, briefly about yourself and Deus and who you are.
Thank you, Michael. Well, we started in the early 2004, I think was when the idea first came up. And I was working with Carby Tuckball, and I had used to own Mambo, and I'd sold that, and I still had just thinking there was just so much more that we could do. And I'd always loved motorcycles, but I'd not particularly liked the motorcycle industry. I'd spent a lot of time in Japan, saw how there was this wonderful energy in this sort of retro style, but with a very contemporary sort of feel to the way they were going about it. And that was the germ of the idea that we decided we wanted to start with. We brought in the SR 400s and the W650s and all those things, and it worked straight away. People were quite captivated by what we were doing. So it was a wonderful time. And I will say, Michael, that on our desk at that time was the Guggenheim Art of the Motorcycle book that the boys had put together, and now we have one on the desk that's come from your exhibition. So it's come right around.
Fantastic. Yeah. And look, certainly I guess that, that art of the motorcycle exhibition, a landmark exhibition at the Guggenheim in the late 90s, and this survey of really, these high points of motorcycle design from really the 20th century and even slightly before. But there, key moments for you, or even, earliest moments in terms of the kinds of motorcycle design that really excited you?
Well, I'm the grand old man of this conference here, but when I was at high school in the 60s, my father was a wonderful horseman, and we had a rural property, and he bought a Honda Ag bike, which was a bad mistake for him because I went for the bike and gave up on horses straight away. But and so I was riding that bike a lot, and then I read the Hunter S. Thompson book on the Hells Angels, and whilst I didn't want to be an outlaw motorcyclist, I could see there was something wonderful going on there. The bikes that they were building, and this great energy. And at the same time, I went to university, and there was, anti-war protests. There were students for a Democratic Party. Enormous change going on. And in the middle of it was these great motorbikes, and the while it is a corny thing to say, but there was an idea that this was an expression of freedom, and you know, that was kind of really was the thing that got me going on that. But we're talking about the 60s and 70s there. So,
and Leo, what about you, Leo? You know, I mean, is there, I suppose, as you've appreciated motorcycles over the years, are they objects worthy purely of admiration in an art gallery? You know, as pure design objects, yeah, how do motorcycles appeal to you?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think I definitely think motorbikes belong in an art gallery. You know, even from production bikes with all of their production parts, right through to bikes that are just built purely for aesthetic reasons. They're definitely objects of desire. They really sort of conjure up some feelings for people, and I guess it's exactly sort of like what Dare said. Everyone probably draws back on something from their childhood, and sort of reflects that into the machine, and sort of thinks to themselves, "Oh wow, you know, like, you know, it expresses freedom, it expresses all sorts of different things to them." So yeah, I think it's fantastic that the bikes are in the gallery, and I think you guys have done an absolutely amazing job putting it all together.
And Michelle, do you have is there an early childhood memory of motorcycles for you, or an experience, or, you know, what was that moment that got you hooked?
I went on a motorcycle trip around Colombia about 13, 14 years ago. And I went on a KLR 650, and it was really fun. And that's sort of when I started coming up with the concept of Fonzarelli. So I think that was probably my biggest highlight.
And so, you know, there's certainly a kind of, I think, or maybe for all of us, a real nostalgia aspect to motorcycles, the way that they trigger memories, or, you know, remind us of fantastic experiences that we've had. You know, and I think, you know, when we think about contemporary motorcycle production today, a lot of the major manufacturers perhaps are drawing on that kind of sentimentality, and there's a lot of motorcycle design that is looking backwards and looking at these kind of you know, high points and moments in motorcycle design. I mean, is contemporary motorcycle design dominated by that kind of sentimentality, or do you think, you know, that we are in an exciting time where we're seeing really compelling, you know, new things emerging? And Michelle, I'll you know, certainly draw attention to. I mean, I think that, you know, Fonzarelli are right out there providing something new, and something that I think is not dwelling too much in the past. The NKD to me is really fresh and really new. But what do you think? Is that leading the pack? Are there others out there that are also exciting and new and challenging motorcycle design today?
Look, I don't really look at what other people are doing very much. And with NKD, it's like a super weird bike. But I really designed it based on functionality and how it rides, and what makes the most sense, because for me, it's a lot about the performance. That's really the fun factor. And also how you can, you know, use what's happening with technology now, rather than the billions of tons of plastic landfill that a lot of the mass manufacturers, you know, put into the landfill every year. Like being able to design so that you can go, okay, let's use recycled plastics and repurpose things, and that's kind of, yeah, that's kind of what interests me.
And Leo, we, you know, when I visited Ellaspede the other day, and we were talking about there was a Triumph on the floor in the shop there, and a lot of what it strikes me that a lot of what you do is take these kind of stock and contemporary production motorcycles and rework them and reform them and potentially style them to remove some of the more boring stuff and make them look potentially a lot more exciting, you know, as a means of individual expression. So, I mean, are there off-the-shelf bikes that you think are doing that themselves, or do you think that it really needs that creative and custom vision to transform a motorcycle?
Yeah, well, I guess for Steve and I I guess the rest of the people at Ellaspede, we're real champions for designers. So, you know, we always, like, we know what sort of concept bikes look like, and usually the production bike looks nothing like the concept bike. And so what we try to do is basically return those production bikes to a concept sort of look, like clean them all up and all that sort of thing. In terms of whether or not major manufacturers are doing it. I definitely think there are some. I definitely think some have been influenced heavily by sort of custom motorcycling in general, and they're sort of seeing, I guess it creates a bit of an echo chamber where they get inspired by what custom motorcycle cycle builders do, and then in turn custom motorcycle builders get sort of inspired by what production designers do. So I think it's quite cool to see over just in the last sort of 15 years how quickly that's all happened and how quickly major manufacturers have turned around bikes to really, I guess, help to pinpoint the market. I mean, classic examples are like the BMW R9T, the Triumphs. They're made specifically to be customized, specifically for this market.
And Darryl, just thinking about just the real breadth of custom motorcycles that wear the Deus badge. There's not a single look or a single kind of style in there. What's the kind of philosophy from your point of view that kind of connects these things, or the common threads with what Deus does?
Well, I'd like to think that everything is okay. Like, we're not particularly judgmental of this is wrong and that's right. Like, I enjoy the stuff with a sense of humor and with no great performance aspirations, but at the same time, the other end of the spectrum, we've built amazingly high performance, well-designed bikes. Michael Woolway in California, he built the most incredible bike, which was designed for Pikes Peak. And the only thing it was designed for was to go really quickly from the bottom of the mountain to the top of the mountain. So that's one end of it. And yet you just showed the goof bike, which is just a silly idea that made us laugh. So, it's all okay.
And, when you come to the exhibition, you'll see that we have a room dedicated to custom motorcycling, and there's some early period custom motorcycles that date right back to the 1920s and 30s. Then there's these contemporary custom bikes. There's a few in the room there that I don't think you'll ever see on the road. They're these incredible objects of design. They're sleek and they're beautiful, and every part of them is custom made. But they really potentially are these kind of objects only for show. But right next to those, there's a cluster of three there that sort of potentially fit that bill. But then right next to them sits the drover's dog with its surfboard strapped to the side. I guess the contrast there is that this is a bike for riding, not just a bike for show. Is that, how does that sit with the Deus philosophy as well, or the spirit you take to custom bike design?
Yeah, as I said, it's all okay. The drover's dog is utility. It's very stripped down. It's useful, but I think it's a beautiful object at the same time. And we have never tried to produce something that we could, like a production item that we can make a whole lot of. You've always tried to explain to people, it's art, it's fun, you enjoy doing it. There's an expression in it, and motorcycles are just a great way to find expression because they have so many applications that they can be used for, and then in that you can find different ways to express yourself. As Leo was saying before, I think the interesting thing that evolved was that, in fact, the big companies, sort of 10 years ago, there's a downturn in motorcycle sales, and they suddenly realized that the custom culture was a way of generating sales, and then they went from totally ignoring us to suddenly embracing us and wanting to be part of it. I mean, as Leo said, the R9T, the BMW R9T, is a classic example of that, where it was designed to pull apart, and that was like something that BMW would never consider doing up until that point.
But then maybe the larger motorcycle companies, of course they're now consciously engaging with this, and they've certainly got a whole offering of aftermarket parts to help you find that form of expression. So there's a kind of in a way that continued kind of corporatization or of the kind of custom experience as well.
If I could just say, Michael, that the technology is such now that once to develop a new motorbike took ages. Now they can do it far quicker, and they can put out things and change things, and they can give the impression of customizing even within a new production bike, because the design process and the abilities have just changed completely. I remember when we went to BMW and Ola Stenegard said, I'd come and work for you guys. I said, come on, Ola, you're head of design at BMW Moto. He goes, you don't understand. From all the ideas I ever have, only a very small amount ever get to, get a green light. And it can take 5 years from the idea to when it'll finally roll off the thing. It's not a very spontaneous kind of working environment. So yeah, I know, but the bikes are really good. I've got one and it never breaks down. So but that was the point, is that they were able to speed that time frame up considerably.
Michelle, you're there as a designer and a producer, and what do you think about that? Around how dynamic the process can be, or how quickly you can adapt and develop.
Yeah, I think for a small operation like our size, with 10 of us, we kind of we're designing and changing as we go. So for example, we're like, oh, it'd be cool if we can put a skateboard or a yoga mat or whatever, and then we kind of just redesign it and change it and adjust. So I think certainly our process is 5 years for a BMW, and probably for their customization where we're working off a stock bike. I think for us, we change things. We can get a full vehicle out on the road in 6 months. So I think we've probably still got a bit of an advantage in that respect.
And what do you think, what's the sort of technology or materials drivers for you that allow you to be that adaptable and that, responsive, do you think?
Because we're fabricating most of it directly behind me in Redfern, so we've got most of the machinery here, and we can kind of have an idea and then sort of produce it by the end of the day, design it up, produce it, and normally have a prototype knocked out within hours or a week. So I think that's definitely a huge advantage for us. Probably also the fact that I'm the leader and I like changing things and I get excited by different ideas. So it's probably like having a child leading the pack.
Fantastic. Well, but that's probably the kind of thinking that makes what you do special and unique as well. So, and Leo, when we were talking again the other day about not only the motorcycles that Ellaspede produce, but the idea that that you're developing components and parts, and that those things have even a market in themselves, separate to the motorcycles, that and that you're able to do that now as a local producer as well. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess we employ our industrial design skills. And I guess what we noticed for our, particular market was that we had a lot of people sort of approaching us wanting sort of certain components and that sort of thing. So we just decided to start producing a bunch of them. So we do that all here, all in-house. We sell parts sort of all over the world. We do a full kit for an SR 400, and something like that. Someone can buy, they can customize their bike in one weekend. So we always say, build Saturday, ride Sunday. So them and a couple of mates and some beers in the garage, and they'll build their own custom bike, which is really cool. And I guess it comes back to the fact that where we are in this point in time. I guess where technology is available to us, where we have not just rapid prototyping processes available, but we have small scale manufacturing available. Pretty much anything you kind of want to produce, there's a way to do it now. Whereas I think 20 years ago, 25 years ago, it was just a lot harder. And it's just that doubling down of technology that allows us to be able to get there quicker now.
Mm. And Dad, do you think that's a real catalyst, for what you've been able to do as well? That suddenly, it feels like, and just maybe to throw back to the exhibition for a moment, we've got these really, really early moments in motorcycle design, from the turn of the 19th to the 20th century. We've got an example of this Brisbane bike that was built in 1906, completely designed and fabricated locally in Brisbane as one of the first Australian produced motorcycles. That idea that all of that production was happening locally with local technology and local fabrication. But then, across the 20th century, all of that production was centralized. That sort of idea of this regional or local production of motorcycles disappeared for a time. And now suddenly we find ourselves in a place where technology and information sharing and modes of production, make all these things possible locally again. Is that something that's kind of influenced Deus production or the Deus kind of design process as well?
Yeah, obviously we've ridden that wave of technology, and from the old days when if you wanted to design something, you had to go to draftsman to draw it up, and it was complicated. Now just a bloke with a laptop can whip something together. And so, of course, this is all the technology is speeding it up. Still, it's still about ideas in the end. You still got to have a good idea. You have all the technology in the world, but and a passion for it as well, I think.
And Michelle, you mentioned that you find your own path and you design things that are true to your own vision, around what you think a motorcycle should be. But there's also this kind of whirling machine of ideas going around internet, the internet blogs, the custom bike sites and bike media, and that are a constant sort of swirl of ideas fleeting by. Is that, how much do you pay attention to that in what you do, and how much does that influence you?
Yeah, sure. Not a great deal, because our influence mainly comes from being electric, right? So it's the aesthetics are super important because they have to be fun and they have to speak to what we're about. But the basis for us really comes from the technology, and so our head is not really. It's like, really, how do we work the design around what we need it to do? So not a great deal, no.
Okay, but what about for the custom bikes? There certainly seems to be, a degree of trend and fashion that influences, custom motorcycle production internationally. And I wonder how much or that kind of dynamic around, acknowledging those kind of fashions or trends in motorcycling is, just finding your own.
Yeah. Look, we don't really have, within the motorcycle industry, I wouldn't really say, or even the custom space, I don't really think I personally take a great deal of influence. I do look at more vintage, like Jeeps, and I like the more utilitarian feel. So that's probably where I draw a lot of influence and get a lot of our ideas from. But I mean, I love what these guys do, and I have a great deal of respect for what the custom space is today and how it's evolved, and especially with what Dad's done, it's amazing. But I don't really think it fits into exactly what we're doing, unless we do our side projects, like we've done some, custom electric postie bikes, CT110, and a few other little projects on the side, and that can be really playful and get ideas. But when we're going for our more production bikes, even though it is like a Meccano kind of very low volume kind of custom look to it, no, I don't think there's a lot to draw from the custom space.
And you build a little bit of flexibility into, particularly say the NKD that users or owners can change and modify and do things with those.
Yeah, sorry.
No, go on.
Yeah, we've had one customer who is customizing their NKD with stop signs, like repurposing stop signs to make the body panels. And then I think they're putting coal stickers all over it or something. So I don't know exactly what I think about that, but yeah, we definitely encourage that, and our bike also has been designed to pull apart and play with it as well. So yeah.
So you kind of, maybe on one hand, are you excited to see how the market responds, or how users or owners might reshape, transform them, and do something else with them?
Yeah, absolutely. That'll be really cool. That side of it hasn't really evolved because we're just starting to get on the market now with this product. But that will be, I mean, that'll bring me a lot of joy when I see a custom NKD riding down the road. Yeah.
Very cool. And Leo, you know, getting back to that idea of the kind of the trends and fashions of custom motorcycle building, how does that, you know, certainly you, no doubt you have customers that come to you that have seen other things, and, you know, there's that conversation about how much is an Ellaspede vision, how much is the customer's vision, how much is a drawing or maybe you know, referential of something else somewhere else. You know, how do you find that working with what you do?
Yeah, I think it's for us. It's you know, we build bikes obviously for a very specific client. You know, that's usually the owner. So we treat it like the design process. So we basically get a design brief from the client. We obviously add our, you know, sort of design touch to it, and we and, you know, we sort of try to steer a client in a sort of certain direction based on sort of what they're after. In terms of sort of, you know, their inspiration and what they bring to the table, our inspiration and what we see, I think it's always a game of, I guess it's kind of almost like the hip hop industry, you know, like the rap industry. It's like this, it's this back and forth of inspiration, but then also one-upmanship, where, you know, it's like, oh, I've seen that online, that's great. How can I take that as inspiration, and then how can I put my twist on it to then hopefully influence someone else to be able to, or influence or inspire someone else to do that. So I think the whole sort of custom motorcycle industry, I think, is made up of a lot of that, where, you know, you'll see something online, you'll be like, oh man, that's great. Like, you know, they did such a great job with it. And then that gets your brain thinking. It's like, oh wow, if I started thinking about something along those lines, what could I come up with that's different, or a different take based on the sort of similar idea?
Mm-hmm. And Dare, you know, I think one thing that I love about seeing the events that Deus, you know, put together around custom motorcycle building is that idea that dollars aren't everything. That you know, you can create some really incredible and amazing you know, things, you know, purely by being creative. Tell us a bit more about, you know, that idea, and certainly the that kind of culture that I know Deus has been promoting around the DIY.
Yeah, well, something I'm particularly proud of is that our bike build-off series that we did. We did it all over the world, but the idea was to do the most with the least. That was what we were looking for, and humor. You know, we wanted people to, like, do things that they were so excited by, and, you know, some kid with an old CB whatever that he got some parts for and bolted all together. For us, was as exciting as somebody had spent a fortune on a chopper. So, and that was good. And we got some wonderful images out of that. I still remember a wheat farmer from Ningen turned up. He'd welded up a frame using irrigation pipe, and he had a Land Rover tire. He had a motor for a water pump, and he built this little bike, and he rode it around on his property. And I thought that's fantastic. It was so exciting.
So you think sometimes even necessity creates some of the most exciting kind of invention for, you know, for unique motorcycles?
Yeah, it was ingenuity and you know, just from the conversation just having, these days every idea is a global idea. Like you do it, the world knows about it straight away. So it's sort of hard for there to be an isolated place where some things are being done and then one day they emerge. You know, the ideas tend to just always be known and always there. The zeitgeist is such that everybody knows immediately. And, you know, you know, you can look at there are the blogs that are just every day there's another bike, every day there's another something that's being done, and whether it's in Finland or South Africa, it doesn't matter.
So there's a bit of that outmoded concept, or maybe a bit of a 20th century concept of, you know, this style of motorcycle will only appear in this culture, in this time and place. You know, those kind of rules and constraints are out the window now.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, but I think, as Leo said, that idea of like hip hop, where I see what you're doing, I do something, I add to that, I do something more, which is, you know, which is fantastic. There's a good energy in all of that. But the, you know, the fact is that everybody sees everything now. That's it's not hidden away.
So is there something lost in that as well? Where, I mean, I think there's still, for example, a few little pockets of creativity that seem quite unique and local. I mean, I'm thinking about things like, there's a scooter scene in Indonesia where these incredibly wild custom Vespas get kind of welded together out of whatever's, whatever's around, and wheels are added, and it's something that I've never seen anywhere else.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that, Michael, that in Indonesia, when we first started there was certainly guys in villages that didn't have the internet, so they were just making stuff up, and those guys are a good example of that. But even the first chopper culture in the 60s, that was something that was just being done there. That's it. There was some culture that was fostering that, and then of course later it went around the world. But the Bosozoku in Japan, which was a post-war thing where they made the craziest bikes, and they had no mufflers, and they rode them really slowly to annoy as many people as possible. But that was just something peculiar thing that happened in Japan.
Do you think have we lost something where we don't have those really intense local, focuses of creativity, perhaps?
It's what it is, Michael. It's just the way it is. So there's nothing we can do about it. I mean, is it bad? Is it worse? I mean, there's lots of advantages that lots of people are seeing lots of things, but those kind of strangely unique cultures are probably going to find it harder.
And what about taking, I guess, that sort of, perhaps, and again, sort of sticking with you for a moment, Dad, that local, or what probably started as a more local idea, informed by this sort of Japanese custom thing, and seeing that idea go global and stretch out.
Well, I think what we did was a global idea. I mean, even though we're in Camperdown, what we did was instantly recognizable wherever we went. People related to it. It wasn't like we, I can't say that we did something completely original. We just took all the ideas and put them together. And I think that was the thing. Everyone recognized what we were doing because the references were all there. And again, I have to give credit to going to Tokyo and seeing these young guys with their vintage references, but they were doing it in a completely, because there's nothing sadder than old blokes sitting around talking about what happened once. It's got to be contemporary, and I think that's what was unique about that culture, was that the references might have been vintage, but the way it was done was contemporary.
So we've got this kind of this global sharing of ideas and a more global culture, but in a way we're also heading in a different direction with this local production model, Michelle, that allows you to create things locally and specifically for markets. What's the bigger picture for you, or perhaps the way that you would like to see that evolve? For Fonzarelli, will it remain a more local market, or would you love to see Fonzarelli as a global brand? How does that relate as a producer?
Yeah, sure. Look, my ambition is to see Fonzarelli as an international brand, and I think there's certainly interest for us to go onto a larger scale overseas. It'll be interesting to see how we evolve as we do enter some key markets, and whether we can maintain that local manufacturing, how we can stay true to what we really speak about today. I think with the products that we have now, if we entered say like a US market, I think there would definitely, we would maintain our local manufacturing, and maybe it gets shipped over in kits and rebuild, and maybe then the customization comes in. But certainly I'd like to say that we'll stay true to the Australian made values. Yeah.
And I think we're starting to see a little bit of, certainly with electric, motorcycles emerging rapidly onto the market, a lot of smaller companies, more localized design, some really fantastic diversity of design as well, potentially.
Yeah.
Seeing things like, the cake bike from Sweden with this very kind of Scandi, design that I think is, quite amazing, and different aesthetics popping up. And I think that's quite interesting that we're seeing that kind of diversity and sort of local visions, you know, growing and then perhaps overlapping into other markets as well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I've got this great book called The Currents, which is talks about, like, you know, the new age and moving to the electric evolution, I guess. And it's just the variety of, like, interesting and weird concepts, like, yeah, the cake bike, you know, the kind of the IKEA guys, I call them. And, you know, it's incredible, the range of different things, because really anyone can do what I'm doing. And lots of people are, like, it's a fight to the top, I guess. But, you know, with petrol engines, to be a mass producer, it was a lot more complicated. But with electric, you know, it's just like building blocks, and it really allows a lot more people to start from scratch and to be a manufacturer. Yeah.
So Leo, you're hearing what Michelle's saying. You know, you certainly got a great sort of design foundation to Ellaspede and what you do. Is there a temptation to go a little further in terms of design and think about production of a complete Ellaspede motorcycle in the future?
Yeah, well, I think if you look throughout history, any motorcycle tinkerer, you know, there's so many brands that are born in the 20s and 30s. I mean, you know, the gallery's got it in the exhibition. You know, you can see a whole host of people who were, you know, I guess you could draw equivalents to today's custom builders. I would imagine, yeah, there's, you know, not just for us, but there's other people out there where there's aspirations to build production bikes. It's almost the, you know, could be seen as like a natural progression of things. Yeah, whether or not that's sort of directly on the horizon for us, we're, you know, we're sort of still mapping that all out. We're just having a lot of fun with what we're doing at the moment. I think, yeah, production bikes, and I think where technology is going to be quite interesting, because I really do think that technology is, you know, pardon the pun, the main driver here. But, you know, we can go into our studio and then our office and design whatever we want, but if the technology isn't there to be able to sort of catch up and be able to, I guess, function as what we need, it's probably going to end up like some of the companies of yesteryear, where they sort of grabbed onto new technology just a little bit too early, and then you just saw these companies sort of tank. So yeah, for us, you know, it's we're not there yet, but it's amazing to see that there are people who are popping up all over the place, producing bikes, particularly, you know, people like Fonzarelli, the cake guys. You know, I love everything that they do, and it is a whole new fresh aesthetic that they have out there.
And do you think, are there new markets too? Are new people coming to motorcycles because of the new possibilities? You know, the new technology possibilities or design outcomes. You know, do you think more and more people are going to be attracted to two wheels in the future?
Yeah, 100%. You know, I think if you tried to put me on a bike from, say, the 30s or the 40s, I think I would have a really, really hard time trying to ride that. You know, you've got trim on one hand, you've got the throttle on the other. Your gear shifts and your clutch and stuff are all different. You've got a little suicide shift on your fuel tank. If you see that progression of technology to now, you know, if you jump on an electric bike, you know, I'm sure it's a lot easier to manage than, you know, sort of say what a 2020 motorbike is to sort of ride, you know. So I think with that easing up and the lower barrier to entry with regards to prior knowledge to know how to actually, you know, sit and ride on the machine, I think that makes a massive difference, and it just opens it up more and more. And obviously throw on top of that population growth, you know, cities getting denser, you know, natural transportation is, why wouldn't you ride something with two wheels? And if you got fun doing it, and it's super easy to park when you get to where you need to go.
Michael, sorry, can I just make a point that the thing we're not talking about here is the electric assisted bicycles, which have created the perfect transition. I mean, because they're not quite a motorbike, but they're a lot more than a bicycle, and they're completely addictive. So, you know, once you've done them, you just can't not ride them, and you can't ride an ordinary bicycle. So then people are already well on the way to the electric motorbike with that, and I think that's had a huge impact. And we're seeing it out the road now. Like these bicycles are everywhere.
I was going to ask you too, do you think you're designing for an existing motorcycle market, or do you think you're designing for a new market, people who hadn't considered motorcycles in the past and are potentially attracted to the things that you're creating?
Yeah, look, I think I would say about 40% of our market haven't ridden, and the sustainability credentials and I think as well a shift away from wanting to be on public transport and be in congested traffic. Certainly we're opening up to people that hadn't really considered electric. I think I was actually just also going to ask the other guys, like, what do you think about with electric? You know, obviously you don't require many technical skills to jump on an NKD. Pretty much anyone could do that. As Leo was just saying, you know, the old suicide shift and having these, like, you know, it's really like technical kind of riding, and it's moved towards almost like not requiring much technical ability at all. And how do they kind of see that? And is that sort of like something sad with this post-petrol age we're coming towards?
Well, to me, again, it's what it is. The electric bikes are just way easier. There's no gearbox for a start. So, you know, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. It's just it's how it is. You know, my first bike when I was 16 was a WLA Harley, where I don't think they had invented the word ergonomic at that point.
Yeah.
But you know, that's at that time that's how it went. But I think that I worry a little bit about the electric bikes, because they are they're a lot more powerful than what people realize. They're
terrifying, actually. Unless I absolutely brace myself when I'm taking off on our more high performance one, you almost feel like you can flip off the back of it. So yeah, I totally agree with that. In the wrong hands.
And of course, we're used to the noise equates to power. So like there's you know, in your head,
yeah,
I'm going fast now because there's a lot of noise coming out of the engine. Whereas quietly, you know, push you along. And I think but people will get used to it. Again, it's just the way the new motorcycles will be.
Yeah.
So I have to ask that obvious question to Michelle. You know, is there a dilemma about the noise or the sound that you would like your bikes to make?
We kind of had this idea to, like, we were sort of working on this kind of Jetson noise. But my sort of thought process and what I honestly think and what I say to people is, if you're in the city and you're riding around, realistically, I treat everyone like they're trying to kill me when I'm riding. And it's like, I mean, I enjoy that kind of, like, you know, process when I'm riding to work in the morning. I do think when you're out in the countryside and, you know, doing a bigger ride, and where I do think there's an advantage to having noise, but for city riding, like, I absolutely love the silence. Yeah.
I know with my electric assist mountain bike, I became just immediately offended by really loud motorbikes. It was like developed an attitude almost overnight.
Yeah.
So Dare and Leo, you know, how do you think your market, or the market for the custom motorcycles that you produce, is changing? You know, are you seeing? Is it just growing older, or is it you know, younger people interested, and the people that want to get custom bikes expecting new things or different things now than perhaps when than earlier on?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we get a range of, I guess, customers. We get a lot of people who are, you know, on the younger side, and then we get a lot of people who are obviously on the older side as well. In terms of, I guess, how that relates to, say, like an electric bike and whether or not they want to sort of customize one of them. You know, we haven't had, you know, sort of too many people come through just yet. But again, I think that's, you know, we're just at the tip of you know, that all starting. And I think, you know, we're really going to see another huge explosion, kind of like what we saw almost sort of 10, 15 years ago, you know, when Dare brought out, you know, Deus, and all of a sudden everyone's like, what is this thing? Like, this is awesome. You know, like, I want to be part of that. You know, I want to jump in and, you know, be part of this sort of you know, style and movement. So I almost think that this new technology is going to do almost the same thing, but it's just how it's going to be interpreted. So yeah, I mean,
sorry, can I just say that I'm from a generation where doing mechanical things was pretty standard. You know, cars tended to break down, you needed to fix them. And then I know when we started Deus, there was this whole generation of people that had no mechanical skills at all. And it was, oddly enough, it was when the single speed bicycle track frame craze came in, and suddenly young guys suddenly had a spanner and they wanted to put a, you know, change the wheel on their bike, and you know, this wonderful excitement sort of came into it, and suddenly being able to fix things and learn about fixing things. You know, we used to do tech nights, and I asked the mechanic, "What are you going to teach them?" And he'd say, "How to change a spark plug and how to change the oil." And you know, from someone of my generation, like that, you just knew that was not a, you didn't need to be taught that, but that was really what had happened. And I think now there are more people who want to learn how to get a spanner and fix things and get involved. I know that we find that if we customize a bike and put it on the floor, it takes a while to sell, but somebody comes in and they want to get involved in the project, it's a different thing. They want to be part of it. They want to pick the parts and see what happens and see how it evolves. It's a different process.
And maybe there's a younger generation that feel much more comfortable reprogramming the fuel injection chip than taking the spark plug.
Carburetor would be a foreign object, that's for sure.
So I'm kind of interested in thinking about how kind of consumers or even riders' priorities change over time. And you know, Michelle, we were talking about it a little bit the other day. Just the kind of the shifting values and the kind of I suppose, you know, resonance or appeal that you know, that more sustainable technologies, recycled materials, and or responsible specification of materials, you know, in motorcycles has in you know, appealing to new markets and I suppose buyer expectations. Tell us a bit more about how you think that you're evolving Fonzarelli in that direction.
Yeah, sure. So maybe I can just tell you about a couple of the design choices. So we use all of our interior, so where your storage kind of parts of the bike are, we've used like recycled shopping bags. So I think people just get excited about it because they're terrified about what's kind of going on with the world and landfill and the environment. And I think that kind of just appeals to people, and they're like, oh, there is a bit of hope. So I think, you know, we obviously genuinely care about that. And also, you know, it's great to be able to tap into that and go, you know, for the interior of the bike, I was like, it'd be cool if it was like, because it's sort of like a canvassy material. It's quite, I don't know if it's here, but it's quite nice. And then I was like, it'd be nice if it was, you know, like in an army green color. So we kind of played around with using indigo and turmeric, I think, and that's how we dyed the interior of the bike. So yeah, just being playful, I guess. It's that appeals to people a lot, and yeah, giving people a bit of hope.
And then on the flip side, do you think that there's, I mean, I saw the other day a trailer for perhaps a movie that hasn't been made yet about, it seemed like a horror film about the notion that petrol engine bikes were going to be outlawed and banned, and that bike owners were going to lose their right to ride old petrol-driven bikes in the future, and you know, it's kind of like the, you know, almost the gun owner saying, you know, the only way you'll get my gun is out of my cold dead hands. You know, will motorcyclists, you know, hang on to till their dying breath to the old loud you know, petrol engines of the past, or do you think that we're looking at only a couple of generations away from you know, perhaps the petrol engine looking like the steam Velocipede that we feature in the exhibition today, a piece of almost forgotten technology?
Yeah, look, I hope that I really hope that they wouldn't outlaw as particularly beautiful vintage petrol bikes, classic bikes. It would be absolutely terrible. I think the way it's moving is that, yeah, it's going to be, you know, 10, 15 years from now, and new petrol bikes won't be produced. And I think that's, you know, that's just evolution, and I think that's a great thing. So certainly, you know, it's not like the old rifles being taken off people, hopefully. Hopefully people will still be able to keep their vintage bikes.
I suspect they'll still be as militant as if anyone dares try and take their motorcycles.
Yeah.
But yeah, Leo, Dare, any other thoughts around that?
Well, no, it's obviously it's too easy a thing for someone to pass legislation about, and you know that it's going to happen. It's sort of grandstanding, and you know, but there will be more electric bikes, and it'll change. It'll change quickly, and I think there will be less demand for petrol-driven motorbikes. Whether they will get that, I don't know. But the electric bikes will take over. There's no ways about it.
I think
You're in the right place there, Michelle.
Yeah, sorry.
Pardon?
You're in the right place.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I've been sitting patiently for 10 years, unlike Dare when he was saying that, you know, he jumped in and it all kind of happened. It's this startup story has definitely been, you know, 10 years of slog to get to the time where it starts taking off, that's for sure.
People will say you're lucky. But
Yeah, just, yeah, absolutely.
So we've only got a couple of minutes to go. So let's project ourselves forward into the future. So Michelle, 10 years from now, Fonzarelli is a global brand. It's selling all over the world and incredible new shapes and forms of motorcycle. Or where do you see, or where would you like to see it in?
Yeah, I'd love to have flagship stores in all the locations that Dare has his Deus stores in Milan, Tokyo, LA. That would be quite the dream. I definitely plan to do a bigger format bike. I just want to keep creating different stuff and having fun with it. That's kind of what I really want to see. I want to keep doing it for a long time.
And Dare, the temple of Deus consolidated into a large museum showcasing the high points of motorcycle customization, or what's it look like?
don't say museum, Michael.
I'm sorry. I'm in a museum.
Hey, you guys do that, not us. No, I think what's unique about us, even though we're not a motorcycle company as such, even though a lot of our expression is manifested through motorcycles, but you know, surfing, bicycles, art, fashion, all of these things are all part of a rich and wonderful life. And I think that's really what we need to keep reinforcing, is that if you open the door and come into the Deus place, you'll learn about these things, and there'll be things to know about, things to find out about, and they're all interconnected one way or the other.
And Leo, just to finish up with you, you know, I think Ellaspede is such a hub of local motorcycle community in Brisbane. You've got this great sense of community through the events that you foster and promote. So for you moving forward, is local better, or is Ellaspede destined for global greatness as well?
I think for us, we'll definitely like to, you know, sort of keep it quite local. You know, we love the interactions, the very personal interactions that we have with our clients. You know, we build bikes that are just specifically for them as a one-off. So, you know, we don't necessarily repeat designs. And I guess on top of that as well, it is that I guess that experience is unique for us as well, because they bring a certain design aesthetic that they want to see to the table, and then we respond to that design brief. And so I think it'd be very hard to, you know, I guess globalize that in some way. Yeah, I mean, we love that sort of more traditional artist designer sort of I guess approach to it.
Yeah.
So, in 10 years' time, if we're still doing this, I'd be a very, very happy person.
Be a happy man.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Michael, could I just say, without sounding like sounding paternal here, but Leo, those bikes you're building are really beautiful. And to be honest, it's my shame I hadn't seen much of your recent ones, but they're really fantastic. And Michelle, you're so brave with what you're doing. Like, you're actually pushing the limits of this, and I wish you so much luck with it. It's fantastic to see.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely agree, Dare. I think we've got, you know, the three of you here are contributing to the kind of the landscape of motorcycle design in such fantastic ways. I think three really great Australian stories that we should all be very proud of. And I want to thank you for joining us today and talking about what you do and what you think about motorcycle design. So thank you very much.